there's kind of this hierarchy, right, of the hierarchy of uses of these byproducts. Like the best case scenario is that it's feeding people, for sure, that nutrition stays in the human food supply chain. Next is, you're using it for animal ag. At least it's being used to feed, as nutrition. Then we've got the composting. And then you've got like the worst is landfill, right? Because then it's decomposing, you've got methane emissions, and it's like terrible to be there. And it really depends where the facility is located, what's around, what the alternatives are. So some folks that we've worked with, they have access to nothing except landfill, and they're having to haul it to landfill.
In today's episode, we speak with Claire Schlemme, the founder of Renewal Mill, a company upcycling fibrous byproducts from food manufacturing into high-value ingredients. Renewal Mill supports the circular economy by diverting food from landfill and ensuring all calories and nutrients don't go to waste but get a second life as a new food ingredient for consumption. The company focuses on flour alternatives as their main product, derived from Okara, soy, banana, oats, corn, pineapples, among others. Now, what's the problem here? In the US alone, approximately 30 to 40% of all food produced goes to landfill and is wasted. That's worth billions of dollars of food, along with all the wasted value and water, land use, fertilizer, and labor involved in producing that. Now, food waste in landfills produces methane, which is 28 times more potent at global warming than traditional carbon dioxide. And in some calculations, food waste is the largest material found in landfill and municipal waste streams. At the same time, the Economic Research Service of the United States accounts for 13.5% of the US population is food insecure, meaning they don't have an adequate and reliable source of nutritious and affordable food. Well, what is the solution here? Renewal Mill extends the life of these ingredients, still rich in nutrients, to create healthy new ingredients suitable for consumption, primarily in existing baking processes. Whether that's at home or industrial baking, these products extend the life of these materials and help divert food going into landfill. This conversation dives into the pursuit for real impact, solving multiple problems within one family solution, the realities of upcycling food, and how taking one step towards an idea actually presents a multitude of different opportunities for an entrepreneur. Enjoy. Claire, thank you so much for joining the Revert Ventures podcast. I'm excited to finally get to speak with you and learn more about your story. But for our audience, I'd love for you to just give that high-level arc of who you are and how you found your way into food upcycling.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such a pleasure to be here and chatting with you and sharing our story. So I am the co-founder of Renewal Mill. We are an upcycled food company that takes byproducts from food manufacturers and transforms them into premium ingredients and pantry-based staples. So that means our business is kind of two sides to it. We have the ingredient side, where we're taking these ingredients, selling them to other food companies, and making sure that nutrition is not going to waste. And then we also utilize those ingredients ourselves in our own branded products, our retail line, which is anchored in the baking aisle. So right now we have a line of just add oil and water baking mixes, super easy to use, crafted by an amazing James Beard Award-winning cookbook author. And that's really allows us to introduce these ingredients to consumers and show them how delicious they are and just how premium they are, while we are also selling them the ingredients to other folks who want to put it in their own formulations. How I got here, I co-founded a juice business in Boston a long time ago at this point, but it was in that role that I saw just how inefficient food production can be. So we were so focused on the juice, obviously, because that's what people wanted, but it meant that we ended the day with just mountains of fruit and vegetable pulp. And we were so careful about our sourcing. It was all organic, and we were working with a lot of local farmers. And so it just heightened how painful it was to throw out all that pulp, because we knew it was a lot of nutrition and it was coming from things that had been grown, with a lot of care. And we were not in the position to really do much with it. We tried to do a few things like juice pulp muffins and other things that we could do at a small scale, but that really couldn't be the focus for the business that we had at the time. And I ended up having a really fortuitous meeting with the owner of a tofu factory not long after I had left Boston and left that juice business. And we bonded over byproducts. So we started talking about challenges in our business, and it turns out he had a big byproduct issue. The pulp from the soybeans that's left over when soy milk is made, and soy milk is the precursor to tofu, so he's making a lot of it. And that pulp, which has a name called Okara, he didn't know, he didn't have a way to use it. And so he was just tossing it. And he was also similarly feeling that pain of like, I'm sourcing organic soybeans. Like I'm working with, farmer co-ops in the Midwest to source these great soybeans. And then about 50% of the mass of the soybean that he's paying for leaves the facility, with this arbitrary designation of waste. So, and the scale was what was really intriguing at the time, right? Because he's at that food manufacturing level where the amount of byproducts, like a solution for it at that scale, could be a business in and of itself. And so that was a really exciting moment. And it really took just getting our hands on some of the Okara, using it in the kitchen, like realizing this is amazing. This is absolutely an ingredient. And I will just mention too that, we weren't the first to discover this by any means. The soybean pulp from soy milk making, this Okara, has a very rich culinary history, particularly in East Asia. Before industrialized food production, people would make soy milk at home. So they were very close to this concept of having the pulp. They had bought the soybeans, so they didn't want to waste it. So, so we thought, well, this is such a great thing to start with. And then that really just opened the door for us to see, obviously, this is not just limited to juice. It's not just limited to soy milk. There's so many places where the way our food system is set up and the way that it's developed is, to really focus on just how do you get from your inputs to that one desired output as quickly and efficiently as possible. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for thinking holistically about other things that are being produced in the process. And a lot of those things that are being processed out are fiber and protein, like macronutrients. We see that protein is really popular. Everybody's like concerned about protein, but we're also seeing the growing interest in fiber. We know that's a macronutrient that a lot of Western diets are pretty lacking in. So I think that's not far behind the protein.
It's the next trend. It's the next trend in food systems.
Yeah. So so that was really kind of the starting point, was with Okara, and then realizing just how many other things were out there. And realizing that there was an opportunity to be a bridge builder in that space and to work with manufacturers, help them solve this headache problem of the byproduct, and be bringing these premium nutrient-rich ingredients to the market.
Totally. That's an amazing story, and there's so much to jump off there. I'd love to understand this Okara. Your brand Renewal Mills is focused a lot on the baking space.
Yes.
And Okara, how does that ingredient play into baking? How does it translate into, Western baked goods?
Yeah.
And what other products are you, or whether, like we say, byproduct waste does your company focus on?
Yeah, great question. So for baking, it's a unique gluten-free flour. So just like any of the other gluten-free flours that exist, there's certain changes that you need to make. It's not a one-to-one substitute for like a wheat flour. We do blend the Okara. Like we offer a pre-blended mix where we've mixed it with a few starches to make it more similar to a wheat flour, just so it's more user-friendly. And that's like our one-to-one gluten-free flour blend that is meant to be more just like a swap in, swap out. But really what Okara shines at is being able to add some additional fiber a little bit of additional protein to your baked goods without changing any sort of like texture or taste or color of the product, because the Okara is very light in color. Sometimes we run into issues with like, byproducts. Like I said, there's a lot of fiber that gets processed out, and sometimes that's the hulls of things that are maybe more brown, so you end up with things that are darker in color. That's not the case with Okara. And Okara also has a really neutral flavor. It's like kind of a subtle, milky, nutty flavor. So it blends so easily in with any type of product. We have focused on the baking space because that is the area of expertise of our product developer, but we've used it in so many other different applications as well. We call it a flour. It could be seen as just like a powder, right? So it's been used in tortillas. It's been extruded into puffs, like puff snacks, or cereals. It's been used in baby food. It's been used in chips. So there's definitely, and used in plant-based meat analogs as well for like a texture thing. So, I mean, there's just like a lot of opportunities for it. But yeah, and I think the fact that it has such a nice, like the attributes of of the taste and the appearance of it are just like make it so easy. And that was important for us. Like we didn't want to start, like, there's so many byproducts out there, right? We did not want to start with one that was hard. Like there's no
No,
need.
for sure.
There's so
Yeah,
many
no.
ones. You can be selective about the ones that are the low-hanging fruit to bring to market. And we did see that, like the first one that was obvious to us was like, okay, this is a pulp left over from soy milk making. What happens with other non-dairy milks? And so the next one that we worked with is the pulp that's left over from oat milk manufacturing.
So does that create the similar products in baking goods, or
Yeah, we
what
do
does
that. Yep. Yeah, kind of the same thing. Right now that ingredient is being used by like a cereal company, like an extruded form. It's been used in like extruded puff snacks. And then yes, absolutely can be used in baking. It's the kind of hero ingredient in our chocolate chip cookie mix. So it's slightly different from Okara. It has more protein actually than the Okara, and less, a little bit, the ratio of protein to fiber is skewed a little bit more towards the protein, which makes sense because we know that oat milk isn't known for being like super protein rich. So a lot of it gets left in the pulp, which is kind of interesting. And yeah, so it's it's a really neat like category and class of byproducts to be working with. From there, we also got connected into corn milling and started working with the byproducts from that process. And then we've also done a little bit of work with some fruit byproducts. So there's a lot in that space. So I wouldn't say that we've like really delved in as like experts in that space, but we do a little bit there, just
No,
because
but
there's so much.
in this season particularly, I'm speaking to a few food-based companies,
Yeah.
and it seems like each of them have their own domain, and that's the beauty of upcycling food, right? And addressing these
Mhm.
problems in the food system is that there's so many areas that have waste that can be specifically tailored to um,
Yeah.
a food category, right? Or an area in the supermarket that we can sort of find supplements for. And that's really the
Totally.
opportunity found in food upcycling. And so really amazing example that you just articulated. I want to go back to something you said, because you mentioned about 50% of the volume of
Just
mass
the weight. Yeah.
of is
Yeah.
dedicated is like
And so,
earmarked for waste streams.
yeah. Yeah.
50% of the mass volume is headed towards a waste system. What's interesting, what I'd like to understand is, this is a food manufacturer, a food processor. I
Right.
imagine that they're so resource focused as an
Mhm.
organization
Mhm.
because their margins are thin, because they are dealing with just physical material.
Yeah.
You know, in my head, I'm thinking these companies must have already intended or found solutions for their waste. Why are so many food manufacturers and food processors having so much waste? And
Yeah.
would a compost Besides upcycling to other foods, why isn't composting the immediate solve for that food waste?
Totally. So it depends on it depends on a couple factors. So you're absolutely right that like food manufacturers, you're often dealing with like such a thin margin that the focus just absolutely becomes the product that they are intending to make. And there's just not the ability to put resources into thinking more holistically about everything that is coming out of the system. It becomes even more challenging if there's not already a market for it, right? So there's some interesting examples of where a market has developed, and now it is more like mainstream or commonplace to be accessing markets for like your main product and then also the byproducts. The one that comes to mind is like cheese making, and the fact that the liquid whey from that process was often just being dumped down the drains. And it started to cause a lot of like environmental issues because of it going down the drain, which led to regulations around the disposal of it, which then incentivized manufacturers, like now that they were being faced with a cost, and incentivized them to figure out a different way to handle that byproduct. And out of that came a very robust market for whey protein. And so that if that market already exists, it's easier for folks to access it, or decide to put their resources towards it. But it really is kind of that activation energy that I think about, which like stops a lot of people. If there's not a clear market, a lot of times where you'd be selling the byproduct into is different than your category, right? Like
a lot of crossover.
is a great example. Like they're in retail refrigerated tofu, and the product that you're making out of the byproduct is a shelf stable B2B ingredient, right? Which is so different. And it doesn't really have a robust market in the US yet. I mean, obviously we're trying to change that, but that means that when you are in a resource constrained business, that is not where you're going to spend your resources. If there's a way to get rid of it, that you're even willing to pay to have it taken away, so that because that you just have to find a solution for it. So you'll even pay to have it taken away. And then in terms of where it goes or how people treat it, there's kind of this hierarchy, right, of the hierarchy of uses of these byproducts. Like the best case scenario is that it's feeding people, for sure, that nutrition stays in the human food supply chain. Next is, you're using it for animal ag. At least it's being used to feed, as nutrition. Then we've got the composting. And then you've got like the worst is landfill, right? Because then it's decomposing, you've got methane emissions, and it's like terrible to be there. And it really depends where the facility is located, what's around, what the like alternatives are. So some folks that we've worked with, they have access to nothing except landfill, and they're having to haul it to landfill.
And this is mostly, you work with manufacturers in the U.S. exclusively,
in the U.S., we've done a little bit of work with some manufacturers in Europe and in Canada, but nobody that we're currently sourcing from for our commercial products, but just kind of trialing out different options. But it's interesting. I mean, I think that this holds true for North America and the work that we've done in Western Europe, that it's like that hierarchy kind of exists, and it depends on where you are located and what the alternatives are for the farmers or the other production facilities that are around. And then you also see, I mean, this is another reason why byproducts can be a headache for manufacturers. Sometimes you might find farmers that are willing to take a byproduct as kind of like a filler feed, but you can see like when the price of a more preferred feedstock comes down, suddenly you don't have people that want to come pick it up anymore.
Yeah.
And so it just doesn't have that consistency, because it's tied to like the pricing of other
Yeah.
feed options. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting because upcycled food effectively, let's call this like recycling food, or
Yep.
food byproduct in a way. It's interesting to the correlations between this market and the way that the economics work within this larger industry versus recycled plastics, for example. And when
Totally.
oil goes down and virgin polyester or whatever polymers go down,
Yeah.
then the economics just don't work the same way, and they're
Yeah.
incentivizing players to actually procure that, because the larger picture, right, is that we want people to be using recycled inputs as much as possible, because it
Totally.
reduces the environmental impact for that production of
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z, right? And it's interesting, as upcycling foods, recycling food byproduct is increasing, hopefully,
Yeah.
as a
I
as a
think so.
industry,
Yes.
as
Yes.
it
Yeah.
should, the impact is immense, much more than recycling plastic or other
Yeah.
ingredients. Um, do you see, to that point, do you see not your vendors, but the people you sell to come in and out, and their demand for your product wane given the price of other
Mm.
commodities?
That's a really great question, and I think that's such an important piece of, like, the other side of what we're
Yeah.
doing when we talk about being the bridge builder. It's I mean, what drives me is the impact side and, like, making
Mhm.
sure that this great nutrition doesn't go to waste, but the only way we can do that is if we are making sure that we really understand the product market fit, and on the side of the users, and that we understand what that value is, and we are communicating it and just illustrating it correctly to the customers that will be
Mhm.
using it. I wouldn't say that we see much fluctuation at this point, but I think that's in large part due to the fact that we have really carefully um, positioned ourselves as specialty ingredients. So we are not trying to compete with a wheat flour. I mean, pricing is it is nearly impossible to be competing with it.
Because of economies of scale.
A
So,
little bit economies. Yeah, I think, yes, I think for sure part of it is economies of scale, and just the fact that even if your input is $0, like you're getting byproducts for free, there's sometimes still processing that needs to be done. With the non-dairy milks, that's a great example. They need to be shelf stable, so we dry them so that they will have a much longer shelf life, and there's a cost to that. So we're able to keep the costs relatively low when you look at other specialty ingredients like other gluten-free flours, kind of like heritage grain flours or nut flours or things like that. And so that's really the space that we want to be playing in. And I will say too, the other thing that's really important, again, I love the sustainability story. That's what's driving me. I
sure.
think for a lot of people, it's like it is like a nice to have. It's icing on the cake when they're thinking about an
Oh.
ingredient being used in a formulation. But what's really critical and key is showing how these ingredients are solving a very real problem that a food manufacturer has, whether it's like,
Mhm.
I need to get more protein into these breakfast biscuits because that's what people are looking for. And that's what's going to drive the sale of this product. Or, I need to have more protein in these like muffins that I'm trying to create. Or even just like, we're trying to make these products, like we're trying to, have them be allergen friendly. And so we're looking for these alternative flours that
Mhm.
maybe are not nut based or something like that. Um, so that is really what's going to drive the sale, right? And that's what's going to keep this ingredient being in demand, is if you are able to make it really clear that it's solving a very critical need for the person who's using it.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah, because I think, one thing that I hope that this show gives to our audience is some examples of how to articulate the value proposition of a business that, is mission driven, is impact driven, right? Finding solutions to really reduce our collective impact on the environment, but obviously solving real problems for businesses and not leading with sustainability. Not that that isn't real or important, but understanding that successful businesses do solve real problems that are not on the macro, right?
Yeah.
Specifically, your manufacturer, you have all this waste you have to deal with. It's a headache. It's a cost. X, Y, and Z. This, these other food manufacturers, these brands need to increase different variables in their formulations to appease market trends, like increase fiber, increase protein, etc. This solution solves that, and is environmentally friendly, and that's the
Yeah.
win-win-win that we want to find.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I,
Exactly.
lo- I love
Exactly.
that. To that point, though, I'm curious. When I speak with founders who are in this food recycling space, I'm always curious to understand how you particularly have addressed the potential inconsistencies or unpredictability of your own supply chain, given that it is a byproduct of another industry. Have you found
Mhm.
things to be
Mhm.
inconsistent, or because of the sheer scale of the production of our food, of our larger food industry, it actually isn't a problem? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is definitely part of it. Again, when we were starting the company and we had identified Okara as this potential first byproduct ingredient to be
Hmm.
focused on, one of the factors that we saw as a huge advantage for us was the fact that soy milk production in the US, in North America, really is highly concentrated. So you really only have, 7 major players in the space. And so you can access a huge amount of supply with just a few partnerships. And and that was really critical when we were thinking about, yeah, scale. Like, how are you going to scale, and like, how do you kind of look ahead to that? I mean, obviously, in the beginning, you're just like trying to be really scrappy and build a market, and you are hoping that it's gonna, that your issue uh, will be accessing more supply. But we knew that looking long term, it was a good byproduct to be working with for that reason.
Hmm.
And the other thing about it is that the way in which soy milk is made is relatively similar across different companies. There's a bit of a standardization to it, which means that the byproduct is pretty consistent, even if it's coming out of different facilities. That was also another thing that was important because we didn't want to run into additional challenges of having, slightly different supply.
Hmm.
Um, I will say that we learned that that is not the case for oat milk. Now, the production landscape for oat milk is similar to soy milk in that, it's really only a handful of players that are in the space. So you can
Hmm.
access a lot of supply with one single partnership. Um, but there's slightly different process for oat milk manufacturing, in order to get the right mouthfeel and not have the oats get like really slimy. I don't know if you've experienced making oat milk at home, but it can get
I've
kind
not,
of
no.
gross. Enzymes are used in the process to break down starches and create some more like natural sugars and like lessen that sliminess, help with the mouthfeel. And the mix of enzymes that are used is a very proprietary thing, depending on the manufacturer. So, um, what it means is that you have slightly different byproducts coming out depending on how that production is happening and what exactly that milk is going to look like. Um, so that was a challenge that we weren't expecting out of oat milk, but it has allowed us to have, basically like additional ingredients, right? Because we can separate them and have two different types of products that have slightly different nutritionals. Um, and like I said, I mean, we do have the benefit that, the different suppliers that we work with independently are able to reach pretty massive scale.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, it's that is working in our favor. But it was a bit of a surprise to realize, like, oh yeah, like there's such a lack of consistency that this is really just like two separate products.
Claire, what has been some of the biggest challenges in discussing or changing mindsets of business operators, consumers around upcycled foods, generally
Yeah.
speaking?
Yeah. For like folks that would be using the ingredient in new formulations.
I think back to secondhand clothes and fashion. And 20 years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
secondhand clothes had a connotation to them, right? They
Yeah.
had a, ew, that's gross, or I wouldn't want to wear somebody's used clothing, or that's for those people, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But now it's trendy and it's a badge of honor in a way. And it's the whole approach to it has completely shifted. I'm curious to know if you think that that parallel could happen in the food system, and what type of reactions do you get from maybe old school people and people who are like, I don't, that waste in our food, that's gross. Like, I feel like there would be a
Yeah.
subset of people who would have a hesitancy towards upcycled content in their food product.
Totally. It's so funny because I was very worried and focused on that in the beginning, and when we founded the company like 9 years ago. And it turned out that we did not actually run into that as much as I thought,
Good.
which
Good.
was to be surprising and a
Yeah.
positive thing. Um, there's definitely been a huge amount of education that has happened over the last decade, and it's been really interesting to watch it and be, so close to it and see how it's impacting our operations, the change in awareness around food waste as a problem. When we first started, we were the ones often telling people for the first time some of these big statistics about, if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter, and some of these kind of like remarkable statistics around it. People had never heard that before. I think now, generally, people have some sort of sense. They might not know specific like numbers, but there's a general sense that like we waste too much food and we should be like trying not to waste food. And so it's like people are already kind of primed to understand that there should be solutions, and how can I participate in a solution? I would say the biggest challenge that we run into with like ingredient customers is probably around price. If they're coming at it just thinking, oh, this is upcycled, your thought is, well, it should be really cheap, because it was going to be thrown out. And it kind of, as I was, mentioning before, that's not totally the case because of the scale and the additional work that goes into processing the ingredients. But and I do think that, kind of flipping now, I'm thinking about like a consumer on the retail side buying upcycled. I think that it definitely is like a secondary message that gives you kind of like good feels about what you're doing, that it's like a good impact piece, but it's always needs to be meeting a consumer where they are for what their needs are and solving that. I mean, I was talking about solving problems for ingredient users like other food companies, but the same holds true with retail, right? Like you've got to be providing a product that a consumer needs and a consumer wants. And the upcycled piece of it, I don't think is going to be the primary driver. I think that's hard for it to be the primary driver. But I think there's some parallels with secondhand clothes, like thrifted clothes in that way too, right? Like somebody is like, you're not going to buy something just because it's thrifted, right? You're going to be going out there to get something that fills a need for what you want in your wardrobe. And yes, that's great when you can find the option that means that it's like treads lighter on the planet. And I think that's a similar, I could see us moving more towards that in food, where it's like, okay, all things being equal, I know I need a brownie mix to, bring brownies to this party this weekend, and this one is better. So yeah, this is, or
Totally.
this one does something
Yeah.
good for the planet, I'll take this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire, I'd love to understand a little bit more about Claire, the entrepreneur and the business operator. Have you always wanted to be a founder? Have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
That is such a great question. I don't think I ever saw myself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always a kid that like loved projects, and I loved creating things. And I loved brainstorming, any of those sort of activities. But I had really more of a traditional path through graduate school. And after I graduated, I was working at a environmental consulting company. And it was during that job when I started the juice business. And it was really fun. It was really fun. I mean, it was stressful, but it was fun. And I love the idea of being able to define problems and then solve them. Like, you get to be the one kind of defining what the problem is and solving it, which was totally different from like the consulting work, right? Where it's like somebody else is coming to you with
Yeah.
like the problem, and you just
Yeah.
need to like help them with the solution.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it was really, and I find myself, I think I realized like this is really fun. And if you can make it work, that's like great. I think at the beginning it was sort of like, oh, this could be like a fun side hustle. And then, realizing like, oh, I actually really, this is a, like, if I could make this my career, my job, that would be great.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. So you were, I mean, obviously starting a juice company, it gives you a lot of entrepreneurial experience moving into Renewal Mills. But before then, you said you were an environmental consultant. You work in the sustainability
Yeah.
space before.
Yes.
What were the strengths and what was your skill sets that you brought to the table as the founder of Renewal Mills?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is definitely that impact piece. So being able to think about what is the life cycle assessment that we can that we can calculate on this flower. Like, what is the impact, what is the reduction in your carbon footprint from using this. We wanted to have real data and some real numbers that we could give people, because it was something that was important, and it was helpful in the the sale of the product. And that was really aligned with my like academic background. And all, I mean, because as I said, it's like there are some processing steps that some of these byproducts require to make them a shelf stable ingredient, and you want to ensure that this is still better for the planet,
of course.
right?
Yeah, let's put those in the
And so,
calculations. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And to show just how much better it is, that was really important too. So I think that piece of it, kind of having an understanding of how to look at impact, was probably one of the first things that I was doing, and trying to understand like what the value is here from an impact piece.
Yeah. So just to be clear, you're the ones actually running the LCAs and doing the calculations, putting the emission factors together.
Initially, yeah. And then we've done some work with companies like Planet Forward to validate and to look at the work that we've done. Yep.
As you said, like there's skills that you bring to the table, and then there are, areas of everyone's weaknesses, right? We're not our strength.
Yeah.
I'd love to understand how you sort of fill those gaps when you thought about building Renewal Mills, how you dealt with getting, managing your finances,
Yes.
doing sales, things of this nature. How did you fill that out? How did you meet your business partner, Caroline?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to be a little bit like, at least what has worked for me is to be, to know that you're not going to be an expert in every area. That's expected. That's okay. And to really utilize the networks and communities that you have around you that can fill in those gaps for you. And I think we've been very privileged and lucky to have been part of different incubator programs and different accelerators. And through those experiences, connected to mentors, advisors, people that have had a lot more expertise in the field. And that just gives you access to, this expertise that you don't have, right? I mean, we're constantly learning. I mean, everything is like, every day you're learning new things, and that's what makes this, fun, right? But it's very helpful to be able to recognize when you feel like you aren't the expert and go try to find someone who might be able to lend you some advice. And I actually met Caroline through an incubator that we were participating in, the Techstars Farm to Fork Accelerator in the Twin
Cool.
Cities. Yeah, and so she was working as kind of a floater associate that was just there to support all the teams that were part of it, all the companies that were there. And we just had like a great connection. Personally, we worked really well together. Her background was in food. She had worked in the White House with Michelle Obama's like food initiatives. And so we thought, well, let's give this a try. So I convinced her to move out to Oakland, where we were based at the time. And and it was a great match. And I think, Caroline really we had a lot of complementary skills. And I think that's why it was such a great connection with us right away. Like we both had the same underlying kind of values and passion and interest. And then we had these like very complementary skill sets. So it was a really good match.
I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah, I know she's a very impressive woman, and I'm glad that she's affiliated with you guys and whatnot.
Yeah, I know.
Claire,
I had all the other CEOs at the end of the
competing for
program
her.
dinner were just like, "Who got Caroline?"
You did. That's the winning. That's the winning. That's the winning answer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Claire, I'm curious. There's the business side of entrepreneurship. There's obviously the sustainability side of the industries that we are in, but of course there's the financial impact of just entrepreneurship in general. And as you said, you're going through a bunch of incubators and accelerators and whatnot, and this is a startup. And before this, you were at another startup, and I would love to understand how you sort of financed your life during these transitions. You had this startup idea, you're this partnership with the soy milk producer, but then you're flying and staying in Twin Cities for a couple months, and then you're going. How does this work? And how did you finance this part of your life and the business, of course, too?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that I think part of what makes entrepreneurship like not as accessible as it should be is because like, if you're privileged enough to have a safety net, a financial safety net, it's much easier to take these sort of risks. And so I fully acknowledge that I was fortunate enough to have backup plan. I mean, even a backup plan of like, okay, if it all goes south, I can like move in with my parents for a little bit, but not everybody has that. And so so, the first business, the juice business, that was a lot of kind of doing two jobs at the same time. So it was a bit of a side hustle for a while until we could see that it was something that could be self-sustaining. So it gave us a little bit of a chance to minimize the risk before fully jumping into it. And then for Renewal Mill, it was, we won a business plan competition that initially capitalized us. And that was the way to sort of be like, okay, like let's take a few months and see how this goes. We got a grant not long after that, which kept it going. And then Techstars was actually when we took our first investment. So we had, that program came with enough investment to really give you some decent runway. I mean, obviously to pay for your, for you to be part of that program, and then some decent runway. And then we've raised 2 rounds since that convertible note from Techstars.
Amazing. A question I always ask the founders on my show is, what did you do for healthcare during this time?
Yeah, great question. And I will say this is like particularly important to me because I am a cancer survivor. I had cancer in my early 20s, and that experience, I had like 2 jobs two opportunities in New York, and one was like way more exciting, in like public television. It would have been super fun, no health insurance. And the other one was kind of boring, in medical field ish,
Yeah,
but had health insurance. And I ended up going with the second one, and like 9 months later was diagnosed. And I mean, without that, it just would have been
yeah,
financial ruin, unfortunately.
yeah,
And so I've been so cognizant of that, since that time. And so once we were, as long as we have another employee, we're able to have a group policy, which has been really helpful. And and we've been fortunate enough to have the budget for the company to be able to
good,
fund that policy. Yeah,
good, good,
but
good.
I mean, it's yeah, important. We have not participated in this, but I have been really interested in some models that I have seen other people do, where you kind of have like a joint pool of startups. Maybe you're all kind of portfolio companies of an investor, or there's some way that you guys are kind of connected,
Mm,
and you share those type of resources, like basically
mm,
getting a policy that you can all access together, things like that.
good,
So
good.
I
Yeah,
should, not an expert to be speaking on that, but I've yeah, I've seen folks getting started doing things like that, and I've always been very interested to do something like that, because it seems
yeah.
like it's a great place to share resources.
No, absolutely. And I mean, just to your point, and I appreciate your transparency on this. I'm happy to hear that there's the survivor component to it
Yeah,
as well. But this particular variable, I think, is a real prevents a lot of people from taking just risks in their lives that they otherwise would like to do. And then this is the reality of just living in the United States.
um,
Obviously, it's an amazing place to be an entrepreneur, but obviously, there's also some issues with the larger system at hand.
totally.
Yeah,
And I will say, we are unfortunate right now. We are facing the the subsidies. Like, we are having material impact from that. So our
yep,
costs are slated to go up 30% at the
yep,
beginning of January, which
yeah.
is really unfortunate. So
Very
make
unfortunate.
sure to call our representatives and tell them
Absolutely.
exactly how this is impacting,
Yes.
the entrepreneurship that's in their region.
It's not the not as good as some of them would like to say when they're up in Washington. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a different story. But may I ask, when did you start paying yourself as a founder?
Good question. I think I was always paying myself a little bit to
Hmm.
sort of help with, you know, just general costs. Um, I think, I think it was our first, yes, it was with our race. So it was like, once we took on the convertible note with Techstars, and that's about 6 months later, we did our first big raise. And so it was in that period where we finally, set a salary and started taking an actual pay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. On the same topic of entrepreneurship, there are days that maybe you're feeling more motivated than others and unmotivated than others. I'm curious to know how you stay emotionally grounded through the ups and downs of running a startup.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think partly this is maybe kind of a cliche answer, but I think
Yeah.
partly it's like, with my family and my kids, and seeing, there's, having that balance with your life, and having life that's not, directly tied to what you're doing in your day to day,
Mhm.
to keep you grounded and connected to sort of what that there are other things that matter, outside. and to see that they don't really care as a 2-year-old and 6-year-old, like,
Yeah,
and that's great. That's very good. I
it's
also
humbling.
There's some things I think that I always go back to that are really fun. Like the beginning of it was just being in the kitchen, and I love that. And I don't always get a lot of time to do that. And so, I find when I'm having kind of a difficult day or there's a difficult time, building in the time to just like go make a new recipe or go try out something new, is really nice. It's really fun
Hmm.
just to get back into like, yeah, this is all about nourishment and creating and making food at
Hmm.
the end of it.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. Now connecting entrepreneurship and back to the topic of impact,
Yeah.
what advice would you give in a new founder to anyone who's trying to address a similar problem of food waste,
Yeah.
food scarcity? Um, what advice would you give them now, knowing
Yeah.
what you've experienced over the last 10 years?
So I think, and I've already alluded to this before, but it bears repeating, so I'll just say it again. I think that the biggest thing is to make sure that the piece that is going to be driving sales and keeping your company going, that is so clear. Being driven entirely by impact and then trying to figure out the rest of it later.
Hmm.
I mean, I get that because I think that's more like how I was initially trying, starting. But to really have that sustainable, meaningful impact that can grow, you need to be solving that problem on the consumer side. And so taking a moment to really ensure that you understand the product market fit and that you know how this is going to, like, where this is going in the market, what this is solving for people, is, I think, so important. And then I will just say another small thing. I will say this is much more technical related, but setting up your accounting system, your bookkeeping system early on, definitely do that. I think we were kind of like, this can be a lower priority, and then it was, you end up spending so much time later trying to clean it. So I am happy to say that we are on the other side of that, but that's my practical advice.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. I love it. Amazing. Yeah, the accounting piece is no one's best friend, but it's an important one nevertheless.
I know.
Yeah. um,
Yeah.
Claire, what topics within food waste and food recycling and upcycling are give you the most hope or give you the most excitement from now and in the future? Is there a specific food category that you think is ripe for innovation or upcycling, solving that problem?
It's funny. I mean, I think it really can be across all areas of the grocery store, honestly. I mean, there's different categories of food waste and how we're working to reduce them. We're solidly in this space of food manufacturing and looking at these byproducts. There's a lot of people working on, preventing waste at the farm or preventing the ugly fruit and vegetable waste, or even all the way to the work that's being done to look at behavior like in a home, like how do you prevent the waste in your refrigerator, which is a different piece of this
Of the
whole. Yeah, exactly.
value chain.
um, but I think in terms of upcycled ingredients coming from these food manufacturers and just making our food manufacturing more efficient, there's there's just so many opportunities that really span the entire, these byproducts are used in so many different items across the grocery store. And I think what's exciting to think about really is a world in which there isn't even the designation anymore of byproduct,
Mm,
where it becomes so second nature to think about or to find uses for everything that's coming out of your facility. And it's easy to do it because we have a system that, allows you to access the market, to do that. That we don't even need to designate things as byproducts anymore. You just have more things that we call food.
Mm-hmm. It's all food. It's all
Yeah,
nutrients.
all
It's
food.
all things that we need to
Exactly,
keep in
exactly.
circulation. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's great to have the story and the narrative now because it brings attention to it. But ultimately, yeah, we shouldn't need it. Like they're standalone premium ingredients in food, and hopefully it gets to a point where it's just treated that way by all manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I'm in agreement with you. Claire, my last question to you is,
Yeah.
what does success look like for you,
Mm.
both from a business standpoint and on a personal standpoint in the next 5 to 10 years?
Great question. We are so close to reaching like financial sustainability with the company, and that would be a huge win for
Mm-hmm.
us to be able to keep work, really just focus on growth. I think that would be a great marker of like, yes, this works. And I would love to reach that point. Um, I think we did cross the threshold of having upcycled 1 million pounds of byproduct
Cool.
last year, which was very exciting. I mean,
Yeah.
arbitrary number, but
Worth
my
celebration, though. Worth
it's worth
celebrating.
a celebration,
Yeah.
right? It's a big number. So I think, yeah, I think that is, but being able to continue the work, uh, being able to continue the work is just success in and of itself, I think,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about the company. Um, and personally, I mean, I think being able to continue working in food, I think, starting with the juice business, I realized this was a very fun space to be in. I love the intersection of sustainability and food, but just in general, I mean, food is really fun. It's a great it's like a cross of science minds and art minds. Like there's
Yeah.
creativity in it, there's science in it. It's just and then it's something that touches everybody every single day because we're all eating and we love to eat. So up until the moment that we started that juice business, it wasn't something that I would have realized, would have thought of myself going into,
Mm-hmm.
but it is a really fun space, and I am still very much excited by it. So I think being able to continue working in this space and thinking about how to make it better
Mm.
is just a really fulfilling thing.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, the world needs more of what you give to it and what you're doing at Renewal Mills. I appreciate you and I appreciate your time today. So
Oh,
thank you
you're
so
so
much,
kind.
Claire.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.